Welcome to Schmidt List, where we inspire and educate emerging leaders by bringing you conversations with the best experts and thought contributors in technology and design. Thank you for joining us today. Now let's listen in as your host, President at Foundry Kurt Schmidt, speaks with this episode's inspiring leaders.
April, how are you today?
I'm so good, and I'm so pumped because we've been talking about doing this for a little while, and then there was that called COVID, and then here we are.
Yes.
So this is tenacity at its finest.
It sure is. It sure is tenacity at its finest. Well, speaking of tenacity, tell me about the work you do, April, so my audience understands who's April and what type of work does she do and who does she do it for?
I should pay you $5 for that transition. That was really good.
I'm a professional,
I'm
April.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Both of us are very professional today. Well, my name's April Seifert. I'm the president of a firm called Sprocket. We are a consumer and fan insight company. So we do the things that if you had to put us in a box, like if you were filling out a survey and you had to check a box, we're a market research company. However, I really don't adore that description. I'm certain I'm going to get on a soapbox about that in a bit. So foreshadowing. But truly, we help clients in enthusiast brands get to know their fans, their customers, their users at a deeper level so that they can design products, experiences, all the things that align to those customers' needs. We do that through a combination of psychology and data science and just, hardcore research skills combined with a lot of design and creative skills. So it's been a ton of fun. We do a lot of work in professional sports, both on the business side of the teams, as well as the business side of the properties and stadiums. We work in apparel, some technology, some healthcare. Pretty much if it's an awesome company who people are really excited about, we want to chat.
That's great. April, the thing that I'm really excited to talk to you about is the idea of making data actionable, because I talk about it a lot on the show, which is people install a lot of analytics. People grab a lot of data. They do a lot of surveys. They are gathering data. They're usually pretty good at gathering the data. The problem is that what do they do with the data once they get it? And because a lot of organizations are siloed, you have sales grabbing certain data sets, you have IT, you have marketing, you have all these different groups grabbing different segments of data for different purposes to help their department and their activities, which is important. But how does the company utilize these things as a whole? How can they make it more holistic? There's a big problem that I see out there. So let's start at the beginning. Like when somebody calls you, where's the typical opportunity? For example, when people call my company Foundry, a lot of time it's, well, we want an app. And I'm like, do you need an app? You might not. You probably don't. That's not so hearing people showing up with a lot of solutions is very common for me. Is that something you also experience?
100%. So our solutions are not, I need an app. It's, we need a segmentation. We need a predictive model. We need focus groups. And it's interesting because people go immediately in the analytical and insight world, they're going immediately to a tool. They're not going to the job that they need to do with the tool or the outcome that they hope to drive with the tool. They immediately go to the tool. And I understand why to some extent, because I think it was back in like 2011 or 2012, Harvard Business Review called data science the sexiest job in the world or something like that. And as a result of that, all these words got thrown around, right? Data science and AI and predictive modeling and segmentation and machine learning and all these things. So people have started using them and that's fine, but we skip an important step when we jump immediately into the solution. And you probably hear, in the design world all the time, like don't skip too quickly to the final design without mapping out what the actual problem and goals are first. And we see that in the data and insight world as well.
Sure. Well, I can imagine people show up and they're like, here, we want to use HubSpot, Marketo. We want, we've got all these things. I suppose as a company that does all, I mean, you have to be pretty well versed in a lot of different tool sets, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah. I mean, the tools are not the problem. It used
Yeah.
to be back in the day, in the beginning of my career, there were companies who they're like, gosh, I wish we had the data that a bigger company had. I wish we had access to the same data sets that a bigger company has. That is so not the problem anymore. Everybody has data. If you start up a Shopify store tomorrow, you have access to data. If you start up just even a Squarespace website tomorrow, you've got Google Analytics almost immediately if you want it. So data availability isn't the problem. It's more of the discipline of how you conduct insight work. Because it can get, to use HBR, it can get big and sexy and you might want to like run, start running with scissors right away.
Yeah.
But that's fun and everything. But the discipline in it is being really strategic and thoughtful at the beginning. And so we don't see people doing that. So now we've got this different problem than we had, a handful of years ago where everybody has data. The new challenges are being really smart at the front end, knowing exactly why you're going into that haystack and digging, right? Like exactly what do you think you might find there? How many needles do you think might be in there? What might they look like? And then when you find them, what are you going to do? Because you could just walk out with a handful of stuff and have no idea what next steps to take. So there's discipline in the beginning. For most of the clients that we work with, however brilliant and so cutting edge and good at their jobs they are, it's a tough question.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine because we do the same thing with product roadmaps, is that a product roadmap, for example, shouldn't be a list of features you want to send out. It should be a list of questions you want to get answered. So I can imagine, April, coming to you. I mean, I think one of the benefits of using an organization like yours is that that's what you can really help is what questions do I need to get answered about my audience, customers, employees, whatever the case may be, because that's where I find that alignment gets built between those different silos in an organization is when you can align on the questions we're asking versus just outcomes or tool sets or all these different things which can sidetrack the conversation. Is that in line with kind of your approach, April?
Yeah. And actually we would have a step even prior to that. So because so many, dare I say 100% of our clients historically and now, it's so easy to fall prey to wanting to jump right into the data, jump right into the survey design, jump right into the, the methodology. It's so easy to do that we kept hearing over and over again, everybody's got access to data. We have all this data, but none of it's actionable. Or we are stuck in analysis paralysis. Nobody's moving. Nobody's taking action or doing anything with it.
Yeah.
And I heard that so many times, I was ready to scream. And I'm like, we've got to figure something out because this can't, and this isn't just clients that we worked with. This is across the couple decades that I've been in data analytics, insight, data science. I've heard it so many times. And so we actually developed something that we call our Insight for Action framework. And this is something that we do with every single project, whether it's a new client or a client that has worked with us for years. We do this framework at the beginning of every single project. And what happens is we pull, you mentioned those silos. We pull all those people together. We make them have a conversation. So we've got finance in the room. We've got, customer experience or fan experience in the room. We've got community relations if they're involved. We've got the marketing team in the room, maybe the product team, whoever it is that has somewhat of a stake in the results of this study or the project that we're doing. We bring them in a room and we ask them to answer 3 questions. The first question is, what's going on in the business right now? And that could be the business as in the umbrella business. That could be my corner of the business. And frequently we hear things like this. We hear a new competitor has entered the market. We hear we're rebranding. We hear we have a big investment we need to make. We hear we want to launch a new product. We started losing customers. Our new customers don't look like our old customers. Basically, what is it about what's going on in the business that makes you care about coming to meetings with me? Because you're busy and you're here for a reason. What's happening? And that does a couple of things. It grounds everybody in reality. Like, we're not doing this project for funsies. You're not sending, these checks over to me just because I'm fun to meet with. I think I am, but it's probably not that much.
Yep.
But it grounds everybody in the current state of the company or of their department. It also, because they're all in the same room, it gets alignment initially on what is our jumping off point. Because sometimes there's interesting friction in between different departments or different people. Like, well, I don't know if I would agree with that because, great, let's hear it. So that, and then third, it gives me the context I need to understand, what do I feel like the business challenges are that we're actually helping with? So when I said we actually start earlier than that, the first of those three questions doesn't have anything to do with what insight do we need or what do we want to do with it or what data or what method or what tool. It's what's up in your business right now.
Makes sense. Everything you explained there when it comes to what the types of things they're saying to you is very reactive, right? It's obvious that obviously not everybody can be the leader in their market or their group. So the majority, the 99% of the companies are in reactive mode, right? Like you said, the world has changed around them and they need to react to it. So what usually feels good is doing stuff. That feels like momentum.
Yeah.
Let's do stuff. And I can see, because I'm a business owner, and so I can get frustrated if people are like, well, let's hold on a second and let's start from the beginning and let's figure out where, and it's like, but I need to check a box, April. How do you handle those conversations?
It's easy to go back to the common outcome that we get to if we don't do this well. And this is why I use the word discipline, right? It's rugged. It's really hard to sharpen the saw while everybody else is like, whacking. I was going to say whacking at the tree, but that's like an axe, not a saw, but whatever, mixed references. But it's really hard to sit there and do your due diligence in the beginning, but I promise you the outcome will be better and you're going to get economies of scale from that investment that you're making, because research and insight work isn't cheap. It's just how it is, but you're going to get so much more out of that. And I just find that since we started deploying this methodology, the quality of the work that we can deliver has increased, and also the rapid way that our clients can completely pivot and start to make decisions quickly. It's so much faster in the end. Nobody's sitting there trying to interpret what we've given them. Everybody has known from the beginning what they need to be watching for and what they're going to do when they see it.
And you can see that you can really get distracted with the numbers too, because they're just numbers. And so they're subjective and open to interpretation in a lot of cases too, right? Because they're not necessarily, so you could start with the high level, right? Which is just like typical vanity metrics, right? Like how many visits to your website or that product page or something. And then you can segment down and segment down and segment down. And there's still just percentages and numbers and things like that. There's not a lot of information there, but you can extrapolate if you're very well versed in your product or service and say, well, because anecdotally, I know a lot of these customers, these numbers tell me this story. And so I'm going to make decisions based on that, what I think is data, but in the end, it is more anecdotal anyways, because it's my bias from being in that industry is still driving a lot of how I'm interpreting that data. Is that a danger that you find? Is that personal bias comes into how people are interpreting the data?
Completely. And that's
Yeah.
another reason for the discipline of this initial step, because we can start to hear some of those assumptions. So,
Okay.
I mean, if you're listening to this and you've been in a position where you've had to facilitate a meeting or facilitate, collaborative session like the one that I'm describing with our Insight for Action framework, you know that there's some questions you can ask that help get at more of the heart of what we need to know. So, hey, XYZ is happening in my company. This is what we're worried about. One of the questions that I love asking is, if we're worried about that, what does that mean we're assuming? We're assuming what? Or if you had to guess, if I gave you $1 million to bet on the outcome of a particular question we're going to ask, where would you put that bet? Like, where do you think we're going to land? Because it helps me see, and it's funny because right after this, and I won't name the client, but right after this, we're delivering a project where there were 2 key assumptions that did not check out at all. And there was a ton of fear in this client around the way they were marketing, the way they were positioning themselves, the way that that message was being received. There was a ton of fear around that was driving decision-making. And we didn't see it at all. It wasn't corroborated. So they're so busy and focused over here on, fixing an issue that isn't actually an issue, that they're missing the opportunity that they could be seizing over here because we only have limited energy.
Sure.
Right. So that initial stage of what is going on in my business is super important. And only then do we turn to that second question of, okay, if that's what's going on, what do I think I'm missing? What do I wish I knew? Like, if I only knew, so a competitor is entering the market. If I only knew, how do people see us as differentiated against them? Do people see that they have certain features or benefits or values or, capabilities that we don't? How does the value of our price point or our value proposition stack up to theirs? What are those questions that you wish you knew? And then really that's sort of like stabbing the knife, right? And then you twist the knife by saying, okay, great. This is the third question. If I tell you the answer to that, what are you going to do? Like, let's say, great, I tell you how you differentiate against that
how are you going to react
consumer.
to that?
Because to your point earlier, data gets really exciting. People want to feel like they're doing stuff, right? We want to feel like we're asking questions and we start throwing in things that are nice to have. And I'm not saying that in our projects, we don't have scope in there for sort of greenfield, exploratory, let's stretch the boundaries of what we know. But if you're asking us to come in and help you make a really critical decision, we better inform that decision principally with the work that we're doing. So what's going on in my business? What do I wish I knew? And if I got the answer to that, what am I going to do with it? And it's important. What are you going to do? And what are you not going to do? What can't you do based on a variety of different, criteria?
That's a great way to explain it, April, because it reminds me of a similar experience I had with a client. So we had a client that came in and said, we have a lot of users dropping off during onboarding. And so and our NPS score is down and we want it up or something. So they wanted us to come in and do an audit of the user experience of the product onboarding. And we did a lot of work around that. And in the end, we were able to help them crank that NPS score up and keep users engaged throughout the onboarding process. But to your exact question, when we asked that sort of version of what you just said, which was, what's the outcome? I mean, it was just, we need to score higher. And I was like, well, why? And they were like, well, it's a big part of our marketing efforts is that our NPS score is higher than our competitors. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. That still doesn't seem the right target. But again, why I go back to the siloed piece, because I could understand the product team. That's what they were being told success was, is move the needle on the score. When the reason why they were being told to move the needle on the score was because of other bigger impacts it made to the business having this thing. So that's why I go back to what you and I have talked about in the past, which is the distraction of data that can come where I'm making decisions without the full scope of what that impact is. And I think businesses can fall into that because everybody is running at full speed, but they're just running in kind of different directions, I guess. And it sounds like what you're trying to do is get everybody swimming in the same lanes there. So if I'm an internal person, and I have a lot of people that listen to this show, April, that are people internally that are kind of those entrepreneurs, right? They're trying to move the needle internally. So you gave us some good advice on some of the things we should be doing. Before I call, obviously all roads lead to hire April's team because they're awesome. But what could I be doing internally now as that sort of change agent in an organization? What's some advice you would give to that person that they could be doing now to start moving the needle on how to assimilate this data in a way that can make it actionable?
Oh, totally. So one of the things that we had in place, and I can't take credit for this because I didn't initially start it, but it was extremely helpful, is analytics tends to sit, when it's doing its job well in a larger organization, it tends to sit at the center of either the organization or the business unit/units that it serves. So analytics, much like IT, they're a support resource. We sort of sit in the middle and everybody comes to us with their questions.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that model, though, is that if I'm one of those business users and I come to analytics with my question, they answer it and give it back to me. I'm the only one who sees the answer to that. And then my colleague over in a different space may have a similar question and may come to that analytics team and ask them a very similar but slightly adjusted flavor of the same sort of concept. So what we started to do at an old job before I, took the leap into entrepreneurship was quarterly meetings where literally we just talked about the results of any insight that had happened. I think this would be even better if, and this is something we've incorporated into Insight for Action for some of our fractional clients, we do this on a quarterly basis where we say, okay, here's what we learned last quarter. And what that, hopefully indicates to you is that a quarter before we had the setup meeting for the quarter we just had. Here's what we learned last quarter. This is what we said we were going to do with it. These are the initiatives that informs. Now, looking ahead with all of you in the same room, what are we going to do from here? And where do we feel like our new knowledge gaps are? And it just keeps forcing that conversation because it's one of those things that we all know we're supposed to do, right? Like everybody's supposed to collaborate. We all go into work on Tuesdays for our collaboration day or whatever, schedule we have now since COVID. But we all know we're supposed to do it. But unless you get in a regular cadence, it's really hard to get an organization to do that. So the other piece that I'll mention is that this comes from my training as a researcher in graduate school. So I went through my doctoral program, did the whole publishing thing, peer-reviewed research, yada, yada, decided I hated it and didn't want to do that work. But the great thing that I did take from it, though, is this idea of a program of research. So not only when we have results of a single study, do we disseminate them widely so that everybody gets to benefit? That's the piece I just mentioned. But the order in which we do studies and the way that each subsequent study stands on the shoulders of the giant before it, the whole gets to be more than the sum of the parts. So the best clients we have, we've been long-term with them and we can say, okay, I feel the winds changing in the industry. Consumers do not feel the same way that they did 5 years ago when we did that study for you. I think we need to do this new part, but repeat a small section of that because it's going to be impactful in the way that you go to market with this new product or whatever it happens to be. So I would urge people, and I'm like the annoying lady who's telling you to eat your vegetables today, but I would urge people to do the discipline around this work because being thoughtful about the order in which you do things, including people who might not seem primary to needing the results, it is just such a better product. It just is. And I've seen it over and over again.
Yeah, makes sense. The the other piece is people weaponizing data is what I've seen too, is to get their way, is to prove that their insights or things are right. And one thing you and I have talked about is that this sort of work can also call out some bad leadership pretty quickly too, because of how you can lie with statistics, right? You can modify things or tell a narrative around, because again, that's what it really comes down to, right? Is because I get it, it's data scientists, data science, but it's really storytelling too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, what I would urge people to do, if you feel like, and this is for people on both sides of that coin, whether you are the person who's presenting data or you're on the receiving end of it. One of the things that we like to say a lot internally is, okay, 1 point does not make a line. 2 points make a line. 3 points mean we're pretty sure we have a line. So what we like to do is look for corroborating evidence of the same finding, especially if we're going to make a recommendation that's going to be, a decent investment or a deviation from a prior way of doing things. I want to be able to say, okay, we believe that this is the right way to go, and we have 4 data points that are telling us that. I don't want to rely on just one thing that, you can like do those funky, like old tricks with data, like change the y-axis to make things look really important.
Yeah, I love that
Not
trick.
that stuff.
It's great.
It's terrible, right? It's so terrible. And sometimes small findings do matter, and you do want to do that, but intentionally, right? But we look for corroborating evidence, because any one little question or test or whatever could be a fluke. Yeah. We want to know that, no, if we're going to make a recommendation, we've got 3 or 4 pieces of data that are all kind of telling us the same story. And even better, if we've got another data point that if that story's right, it should go in this other direction. Like, if we change this, it should go sideways. If we see that, then we're pretty sure. If we don't have that, sometimes we can't get it. I would urge people to don't ditch the recommendation necessarily, but now you're in small experiment waters. Don't bet the farm. Don't do something big. Tiny experiments to sort of, it's the test and learn thing that people love to do,
an
but
org
in a
change structurally. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, because again, you're triggering something with me, because I remember having arguments with bosses about numbers that I would be told these are the important numbers, and they're just moving targets. They just move all. And again, it comes back to, we're human, we're emotional creatures. So we react emotionally to this data, and anecdotally and metaphorically and all these things. And so the idea has always been, to me, was data would help sort of bridge the gap between it would take out a lot of the emotion out of things, and it would take out a lot of, but you still need to tell a story, because we're people, and that's what we listen to. Is we listen to stories. We don't like numbers. Even mathematicians, they're using math to tell a story. So, is that something that has been exciting yet challenging for you in the work that you're doing? Is that storytelling aspect to it? I'm guessing that is like such an art and craft for you.
It's a huge part of what we do.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, like, at this stage in my career, I joke about, I've been coding in whatever the language du jour is for a couple of decades now. And I don't think that there is a, data issue that I haven't figured out how to code around at some point. That stuff's not as fun anymore. What is fun is the piece that you just mentioned. The craft around how do you help somebody who has a lot on the line? How do you help them understand the aspects of whatever insight that we've uncovered that will help them move forward. And you mentioned emotion. The two that come up most often in our world, one's not great and one is what we strive for every time. The not great one is overwhelm. So insight for action, when we present, our projects are not tiny. The questions we help with are not small. So we tend to have pretty meaty deliverables. It's easy to get overwhelmed in those findings if we haven't started in a solid place. If we don't start with insight for action, if I can't go back and say, here's what we found. And remember, we all sat in a room and said, this is what we're going to do. Here's an idea in that space for you that helps you think about how you might tactically move forward.
Yeah.
It helps cut that overwhelm because it's like people get completely distracted and their eyes glaze over like one of those magic eye posters when they see 1,000 different bar graphs and like different visuals. It's like, whoa, I don't even know what to look at. I mean, we have so much data and none of this is actionable. We go right back to why did we ask the question and what did we say we would do if we got the answer to it? Let's calm down and let's try that. Let's do what we said we would do. Yeah. So that's kind of one emotion that this whole thing is meant to combat. And the emotion we're striving for is confidence. I want people to feel much more confident. I want you to feel calm. I want you to feel like you are supported in the decisions you make. Because I work with a lot of marketers, I work with a lot of product designers. Your path is not perfectly trodden for you. You're out there bushwhacking every day, trying to find the path forward. Yeah. And that's a difficult position to be in. It's a scary position to be in. You stick your neck out there almost every day. And I see data and insight not as something to prove a point or whatever, but to give really good professionals the tools they need to do their jobs more confidently. Because like, you know this, right? The most creative people, they flourish and are able to be more creative and more thoughtful and innovative in safe spaces. So if you feel like you're standing on solid ground, you feel much safer to allow your mind to relax and create than if you have nothing to go on. Right. So, when we think about emotion, I mean, it's a bunch of psychologists and data people who work with us, but like hugely psychology. Empathy is a big deal for what that client might be going through. And we're going for that confident feeling, like that space of safety. Now go create. And this is the direction you should go. Yeah.
That makes total sense. Yeah. Like I said, every time we've presented any kind of results or data or things, when it comes to the work that we're doing, we always have to take in that factor. And I think that's an important tip, what you just called out there for people that are internally trying to be change agents and trying to move the needle is don't forget that these are human beings. And just because your data seems indisputable, unassailable, doesn't mean that people are not going to have an emotional reaction to it. And, the famous, the typical term analysis paralysis, which is what you just called out, right? Just being overwhelmed with, well, what do I do with all this stuff? You know what I'll do? I'll do nothing. I'll just keep doing what I did before.
It's the safest thing.
Yeah. Right.
It is. And to the consultants out there, this is just, so much around consulting and, this sort of insight work and the strategy work that we do. It is very relationship based. We get, very close with our clients in terms of, what's going on in your role and help us understand the broader landscape and context. Nothing beats the age old, just have a conversation with that person. I've learned time and time again in my career that it's that Ariely book. People are predictably irrational. Like that, and this isn't exactly the right context of that.
Sure. Yeah, I know.
Title. But if a person is acting in an irrational way, if they seem like they're being out of sorts, uncharacteristic, there's a pressure somewhere that you don't see. Mm-hmm. And maybe they'll share it with you. But maybe you can just assume positive intent that person is doing the best they can given a set of circumstances that you might not be privy to. So, this is the soft side of insight and analysis work, but it's the side where if you're doing right by your clients, you literally care that they're having a good experience and able to move forward with what you're providing. And sometimes that just means understanding that context a little bit more and what they might be up against.
Well, because the confidence you're bringing, and whether that be an outside consultant or that change agent inside the place, is that you're showing up as a partner. Like, hey, I'm on this journey with you. You're not alone anymore in those things that you're having to deal with. So it should be looked at as a partnership. But to your point, assuming positive intent is also really important, because in change, in some cases, you're going to have to ask people to disagree and commit. Yep. I know you. I know you don't. I know you don't agree with this thing, but I need you to commit to this path and go down this path so we can find out what we need to find out, whether or not it's true or not. Right.
That's really good. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it goes back to the experimentation piece. If you feel like there's so much trepidation about that next step, experiment, but experiment thoughtfully. Like, put the measurement in place, know what you're looking for. We're going to know that we succeeded if what. And when we know the answer to that, what are we going to do? Like, action in any analytical scenario, whether it's a big project that we would undertake for one of our largest clients or something tiny that you are just testing your way forward, the discipline of knowing, why in the heck are we doing this in the first place? What do we need to know? And what are we going to do when we find it out? It's just absolutely critical. It makes or breaks the success of any analytical project.
Yeah. And don't make it too complicated, right? I mean, the more complexity you add to it, it's just going to be more difficult to iterate on over time. That's another thing that I find out, is that people try to sneak in large changes into small actions. Because again, I get it. I'm a business owner too. I want to see tsunamis of change happening. I want, when we're struggling with something, right? But sometimes you gotta chip away at it, right? You've got to take it one step at a time, which, it's just going to be a better foundation later.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Yeah. It's so funny because I've been having these conversations with people about, like, I'm glad we're getting so excited. I'm glad we're running out into the field, and getting into this work that we're doing. Yeah. And like I said, we do have some space, right? We do have some space for some of that greenfield. We don't know what's going to happen. I wonder what they will say if we ask them this question. What if one of my favorite things to do when we're in a greenfield situation, and it always uncovers cool stuff, is if we force people to make a dichotomous choice. Would you rather have this or that? Especially if it's in a situation where there's like decent gray area. Like, no, force them to pick. Which one do they want? And it gets really interesting because it gets down to people's like knee-jerk reaction. And that's really fun too. Yeah. So some of that greenfield work where we're pushing the boundaries of what we know, we're starting to maybe experiment into new waters. That's really fun. But again, the purpose of this work, the purpose of insight and data and analysis and all of it should be to help us make more confident decisions. And that means we got to stay grounded and disciplined in what's going to help us do that.
I think it's fantastic, April. The work you do is amazing. So speaking of, if I want to get in touch with you, April, and learn more about you and your team, or just follow the things that you share online, where is a good place to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm easiest to find there. So Search for me on LinkedIn. And I can give you that handle as well so that people can just click into it. And then if you want, you can pop over to sprocketcx.com/insight for action. And I've got a downloadable form. This is sort of the homework that we send to a lot of our clients before they prep for that co-creation session. And it's just a little bit of homework to help you understand, okay, what is it that's going on in my business? What do I wish I knew? And what would I do if I got the answer to that? It just kind of helps you work through some of those questions on a DIY sort of scale.
That sounds super valuable. Well, to all the listeners out there, I will put it in the description so you can find it there. April, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. It's always a pleasure. I learn so much every time I get the chance to spend time with you. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
Likewise. Thank you for the invite, and go buy his book. It's so good.
We hope you join us for more conversations in the future with leading experts in technology and design. Please contact us at schmidt-list.com and foundrymakes.com for more information.